Hi everyone, welcome back to the Crazy in Anatomy YouTube channel. So today we will talk about the shoulder joint. Without waiting so long, let's start our topic. The learning outcome of today's topic: all the viewers after watching this video can name the part of the bone. And then you know how many joints we have in our shoulder joint and understand the function of the joint and the muscle in our shoulder.
Shape and structure of the scapula has a triangular shape with three borders, superior, medial, and lateral, and three angles, superior, inferior, and lateral. Its flat shape allows for attachment of muscles and provides stability to the shoulder joint. Acromion process, the lateral extension of the scapular spine that articulates with the clavicle to form the acromioclavicular joint. Coracoid process, a hook-like projection on the anterior aspect of the scapula, providing attachment for muscles and ligaments. Glenoid cavity, glenoid fossa, a shallow, concave depression on the lateral aspect of the scapula, serving as the socket for the head of the humerus to form the glenohumeral joint. The clavicle, commonly known as the collarbone, is a long, slender bone that is located horizontally between the sternum, breastbone, and the scapula, shoulder blade. It is an important bone for shoulder girdle function and provides support for the upper limb. The clavicle is an S-shaped bone that is slightly curved, with two main curvatures, a medial, sternal, end and a lateral, acromial, end. The medial end is thicker and has a rounded shape, while the lateral end is flattened and broadened. Medial, sternal, end, the rounded end of the clavicle that articulates with the sternum at the sternoclavicular joint. Lateral, acromial, end, the flattened end of the clavicle that articulates with the acromion process of the scapula at the acromioclavicular joint. Conoid tubercle, a small bump on the inferior surface of the lateral end where the conoid ligament attaches. Trapezoid line, a ridge on the superior surface of the lateral end where the trapezoid ligament attaches. D, the sternum, commonly referred to as the breastbone, is a flat bone located in the center of the anterior thoracic wall. It is a crucial anatomical landmark and provides attachment points for various muscles and ribs. Shape and structure of the sternum typically has three main parts. Manubrium, the broad, uppermost part of the sternum. It is shaped like a flattened triangle and articulates with the clavicles and the first rib. Body, or gladiolus, the elongated, middle part of the sternum. It is the longest portion and connects with the manubrium above and the xiphoid process below. Xiphoid process, the smallest and most inferior part of the sternum. It is a thin, cartilaginous structure that ossifies with age and serves as an attachment site for some abdominal muscles. Landmarks. Jugular notch, suprasternal notch, a concave indentation at the superior aspect of the manubrium. Sternal angle, angle of Louis, the bony ridge formed by the junction of the manubrium and the body of the sternum. It serves as an important landmark for counting ribs and locating other structures. Xiphisternal junction, the point of articulation between the body of the sternum and the xiphoid process. The humerus is the long bone in the upper arm, extending from the shoulder to the elbow joint. It is one of the major bones in the human body and plays a crucial role in arm movement and support. The word humerus is derived from the Latin term for the bone. Anatomically, the humerus consists of several key features. At its proximal end, it articulates with the scapula, shoulder blade, to form the shoulder joint, also known as the glenohumeral joint. This articulation allows for a wide range of motion of the arm. The proximal end of the humerus also includes the greater and lesser tubercles, which serve as attachment sites for muscles and ligaments involved in shoulder movement and stability. The shaft of the humerus is relatively cylindrical in shape and provides attachment points for numerous muscles that control movement of the elbow, forearm, and wrist. Additionally, the shaft of the humerus contains the nutrient foramen, through which blood vessels enter to supply the bone with nutrients. Now here is a marking section of the shoulder bone. You need to prepare a paper and write down the answers on the marking section. Then check it back whether the answer is correct or not. Because we must remember the name of the bone on a different view. It is very important, so that you can more easily to understand the anatomical landmark. The SC joint is formed by the medial end of the clavicle and the shallow, concave facet on the upper part of the sternum, known as the clavicular notch. The articular surfaces of the clavicle and sternum are covered with hyaline cartilage to reduce friction and absorb shock during movement. Ligaments. Several ligaments support and stabilize the sternoclavicular joint. Anterior sternoclavicular ligament. It reinforces the front of the joint. Posterior sternoclavicular ligament. It reinforces the back of the joint. Interclavicular ligament. It connects the superior aspects of the clavicles, contributing to joint stability. Costoclavicular ligament. It connects the clavicle to the first rib and provides additional stability to the joint. Movements of the SC joint allows for a variety of movements, including elevation and depression, upward and downward movements of the clavicle. Protraction and retraction, forward and backward movements of the clavicle. Rotation, medial and lateral rotation of the clavicle. The scapulothoracic joint is not a true joint in the traditional sense, as it does not involve the articulation of bones with a synovial joint capsule. Instead, it's a functional joint formed by the interaction between the scapula, shoulder blade, and the thoracic wall, rib cage. This interaction allows for coordinated movements of the scapula during various shoulder motions. The scapulothoracic joint plays several important roles in shoulder function, include the stability and mobility to the joint. Movement of the scapulothoracic joint include the protraction, forward movement of the scapula away from the midline of the body. Retraction, pulling the scapula back toward the midline of the body. Elevation, upward movement of the scapula. Depression, downward movement of the scapula. Upward rotation, rotation of the scapula upward, allowing the glenoid cavity to tilt upward. While there are no ligaments specifically associated with the scapulothoracic joint, the stability of the joint is maintained by the surrounding muscles and soft tissues. Muscles such as the trapezius, serratus anterior, rhomboids, and levator scapulae play crucial roles in controlling the movements of the scapula and stabilizing the shoulder complex. Downward rotation, rotation of the scapula downward, returning it to its resting position. The acromioclavicular joint, AC joint, is a synovial joint located at the junction of the acromion process of the scapula, shoulder blade, and the lateral end of the clavicle, collarbone. It is one of the main articulations in the shoulder complex, and plays a significant role in shoulder stability and movement. Ligaments. Several ligaments support and stabilize the AC joint, including acromioclavicular ligament, connects the acromion to the clavicle and provides horizontal stability to the joint. Coracoclavicular ligament consists of two parts, the conoid ligament and the trapezoid ligament. These ligaments connect the coracoid process of the scapula to the clavicle and provide vertical stability to the joint. The function of the acromioclavicular joint including shoulder stability, the AC joint, along with other ligaments and structures in the shoulder complex, helps maintain stability and proper alignment of the shoulder girdle. Load transmission, the AC joint assists in transmitting forces from the upper limb to the axial skeleton, particularly during activities that involve overhead movements or weight bearing. Mobility, while the AC joint itself has limited mobility, it allows for slight movements of the clavicle, contributing to the overall mobility of the shoulder complex. The glenohumeral joint, commonly referred to as the shoulder joint, is a highly mobile ball and socket joint that connects the head of the humerus, upper arm bone, with the glenoid cavity of the scapula, shoulder blade. It is one of the main articulations in the shoulder complex, and plays a pivotal role in facilitating a wide range of arm movements. Ligaments. Several ligaments support and stabilize the glenohumeral joint, including glenohumeral ligaments, a group of ligaments that reinforce the anterior aspect of the joint capsule, providing stability to the front of the shoulder. Coracohumeral ligament connects the coracoid process of the scapula to the greater tubercle of the humerus, supporting the upper part of the joint capsule. Transverse humeral ligament holds the long head of the biceps tendon within the intertubercular groove of the humerus. Function of the glenohumeral joint allows for a wide range of movements in the shoulder, including flexion, forward movement of the arm; extension, backward movement of the arm; abduction, outward movement of the arm away from the body; adduction, inward movement of the arm toward the body; internal rotation, rotation of the arm inward toward the body; external rotation, rotation of the arm outward away from the body. Let's talk about the muscle of the scapulothoracic joint. The trapezius muscle origins start from the medial third of the superior nuchal line, external occipital protuberance, ligamentum nuchae, spinous processes of C7, T12 vertebrae. Insertion of this muscle is inserts onto the lateral third of the clavicle, acromion process, and spine of the scapula. The levator scapula originates from the transverse processes of the first four cervical vertebrae, C1, C4. The superior part of the muscle originates from the posterior tubercles of the transverse processes of C1 and C2, also known as the atlas and axis vertebrae, respectively. The inferior part of the muscle originates from the posterior tubercles of the transverse processes of C3 and C4. The muscle inserts onto the medial border of the scapula, specifically on the superior angle of the scapula, and the adjacent medial border between the superior angle and the spine of the scapula. The latissimus dorsi muscle originated from several points along the posterior trunk, including spinous processes of vertebrae T7 to L5, thoracic and lumbar regions; thoracolumbar fascia, which is a strong sheet of connective tissue covering the lower back; posterior iliac crest, which is the top rim of the pelvic bone on the backside. The muscle inserts onto the floor of the intertubercular groove, also known as the bicipital groove of the humerus. The rhomboids major muscle originates from the spinous processes of the thoracic vertebrae T2 to T5. It inserts onto the medial border of the scapula, specifically onto the triangular space inferior to the spine of the scapula. The rhomboids minor originates from the spinous processes of the upper thoracic vertebrae, specifically from vertebrae T2 to T5, or T6. It also inserts onto the medial border of the scapula, but it inserts slightly superior to the rhomboid major, close to the root of the spine of the scapula. The serratus anterior muscle is a large muscle located on the lateral aspect of the thorax. The serratus anterior muscle originates from the outer surface of the upper 8 or 9 ribs, or ribs 1 to 8 or 9. Specifically, the muscle originates from the external surfaces and superior borders of these ribs, starting from the first or second rib and extending downwards towards the 8th or 9th rib. The muscle inserts onto the medial border of the scapula. Specifically, the muscle fibers of the serratus anterior converge towards the medial border of the scapula, forming multiple finger-like projections that insert onto the medial border, spanning from the superior angle to the inferior angle of the scapula. The pectoralis minor muscle is a thin, triangular muscle located in the upper chest region. The pectoralis minor muscle originates from the 3rd, 4th, and 5th ribs, near their cartilage attachments to the sternum, breastbone. The muscle inserts onto the coracoid process of the scapula, a bony prominence located on the anterior surface of the scapula near the shoulder joint. Here is the movement of the scapulothoracic joint. Scapular elevation. Movement. Upward movement of the scapula. Muscles involved: levator scapulae, upper trapezius. Scapular depression. Movement. Downward movement of the scapula. Muscles involved: lower trapezius, pectoralis minor. Scapular protraction, abduction. Movement. Forward movement of the scapula away from the spine. Muscles involved. Serratus anterior, pectoralis minor. Scapular retraction, adduction. Movement. Backward movement of the scapula toward the spine. Muscles involved. Rhomboids, major and minor, middle trapezius. Scapular upward rotation. Movement. Upward rotation of the scapula, where the glenoid cavity, shoulder socket, tilts upward. Muscles involved. Serratus anterior, upper trapezius. Scapular downward rotation. Movement. Downward rotation of the scapula, returning it to its resting position. Muscles involved. Levator scapulae, lower trapezius. The deltoid muscle has 3 distinct heads, each with its own origin. Anterior, clavicular, head, originates from the lateral third of the clavicle. Middle, acromial, head, originates from the acromion process of the scapula. Posterior, spinal, head, originates from the spine of the scapula. All 3 heads of the deltoid muscle converge and insert onto a common insertion point. The deltoid inserts onto the deltoid tuberosity of the humerus, a roughened area located on the lateral surface of the midshaft of the humerus bone. The pectoralis major muscle is a large, fan-shaped muscle located in the anterior chest region. It plays a crucial role in movements of the shoulder joint, particularly in actions like shoulder flexion, adduction, and medial rotation. Pectoralis major muscle originates from several points on the anterior thoracic wall, including clavicular head, originates from the medial half of the clavicle. Sternocostal head, originates from the sternum, sternal head, and the upper 6 costal cartilages, costal head, including the cartilages of the 2nd to 6th ribs. Abdominal aponeurosis originates indirectly from the external oblique aponeurosis of the abdomen. The muscle inserts onto the proximal humerus, specifically. The pectoralis major inserts onto the lateral lip of the intertubercular, bicipital, groove of the humerus. The coracobrachialis muscle is a slender, cylindrical muscle located in the anterior compartment of the upper arm. The coracobrachialis muscle originates from the coracoid process of the scapula, a bony projection located on the front of the scapula near the shoulder joint. The muscle inserts onto the medial surface of the humerus, specifically onto the middle third of the medial border of the humerus. The coracobrachialis muscle plays a role in flexing and adducting the arm at the shoulder joint. It assists in bringing the arm toward the body and in flexing the shoulder joint, particularly when the arm is in a neutral or slightly abducted position. The biceps brachii muscle, often simply referred to as the biceps, is a prominent muscle in the anterior compartment of the upper arm. The long head of the biceps brachii originates from the supraglenoid tubercle of the scapula, which is a bony prominence above the shoulder joint within the shoulder girdle. The short head of the biceps brachii originates from the coracoid process of the scapula, which is a bony projection on the front of the scapula near the shoulder joint. The biceps brachii inserts onto the proximal radius bone of the forearm. Specifically, the tendon of the biceps brachii inserts onto the radial tuberosity, a bony prominence on the medial side of the radius bone near the elbow joint. The triceps brachii is a large muscle located on the posterior side of the upper arm. The long head of the triceps brachii originates from the infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula, which is a bony prominence below the shoulder joint on the scapula. The lateral head of the triceps brachii originates from the upper half of the posterior surface of the humerus bone. The medial head of the triceps brachii originates from the posterior surface of the humerus below the radial groove. The triceps brachii inserts onto the olecranon process of the ulna, which is the bony prominence at the tip of the elbow. The primary function of the triceps brachii muscle is elbow extension. When the triceps brachii contracts, it straightens the arm at the elbow joint, bringing the forearm away from the upper arm. This action is crucial for movements like pushing, lifting, and throwing. The teres minor muscle originates from the lateral border and adjacent posterior surface of the scapula. It inserts onto the greater tubercle of the humerus, a bony prominence on the lateral aspect of the proximal humerus. The teres minor muscle primarily assists in the stabilization of the shoulder joint, particularly in movements involving external rotation of the arm. It is an important muscle for maintaining proper shoulder mechanics and stability, especially during activities that require overhead arm movements or throwing motions. The teres major muscle originates from the inferior angle and lower part of the lateral border of the scapula. It inserts onto the medial lip of the intertubercular groove of the humerus, which is a bony depression on the anterior surface of the humerus. The teres major muscle contributes to several movements of the shoulder joint, including shoulder extension, medial rotation, and adduction. It is particularly involved in actions like pulling the arm down from an overhead position or pulling the arm back behind the body. The supraspinatus is one of the four muscles that comprise the rotator cuff in the shoulder. It plays a crucial role in stabilizing the shoulder joint and initiating the movement of shoulder abduction. The supraspinatus muscle originates from the supraspinous fossa, which is a depression on the posterior aspect of the scapula. It inserts onto the greater tubercle of the humerus, which is a bony prominence on the lateral aspect of the proximal humerus. Above the spine of the scapula.
The subscapularis is one of the four muscles that make up the rotator cuff in the shoulder. It is the largest and strongest of the rotator cuff muscles and plays a crucial role in stabilizing the shoulder joint and facilitating internal rotation of the arm. The subscapularis muscle originates from the subscapular fossa, which is a concave depression on the anterior aspect of the scapula. It inserts onto the lesser tubercle of the humerus, which is a bony prominence on the anterior aspect of the proximal humerus. The infraspinatus muscle is one of the four muscles that make up the rotator cuff in the shoulder. It plays a crucial role in stabilizing the shoulder joint and facilitating external rotation of the arm. The infraspinatus muscle originates from the infraspinous fossa, which is a depression on the posterior aspect of the scapula below the spine of the scapula. It inserts onto the greater tubercle of the humerus, which is a bony prominence on the lateral aspect of the proximal humerus. Here is a summary of the muscle involved in the glenohumeral joint. Then you can see the marking section of the muscle on the shoulder. Then you can try fill up the answers on the paper. Then see whether you had memorized the muscle position of the muscle. If you felt this video are useful for you, then you click the link bottom and share this video to your friend. Thank you so much. See you guys on the next video.